Good day, my dear students! For today's video, we're going to talk about the tricks to find the value of trigonometric functions with the use of our hands only. So kung maaalala niyo po, para makuha natin ang values ng trigonometric function, we have these values o kaya naman gumagamit tayo ng calculator. However, paano kung wala tayong trigonometric function tables and wala din tayong calculator? Kaya pa rin ba nating makuha ang value nila? So actually kaya po, ang kailangan lang po natin ay ang mga kamay natin at ang ating mga daliri. But first, let's assign values for each finger. Let's assign 0 degrees for the little finger. We have 30 degrees for our ring finger, middle finger 45 degrees. Our forefinger, we have 60 degrees. And this one, our thumb, will have 90 degrees. Now, ito po, patihaya pong kamay ang ating gagamitin kapag ang hinahanap po natin ay mga values ng sine, cosine, secant, and cosecant. So first, how to find the values of cosine? So cosine theta will equal to the square root of the fingers above over 2. So ano pong ibig sabihin yan? For example, let's have cosine 0 degrees is equal to the square root of, so 0 degrees, ito po. So ilan pong fingers above 0 degrees? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 fingers. So 4 divided by 2. What is the square root of 4? That is 2 over 2. Now, 2 over 2 is equal to 1. So therefore, cosine 0 degrees must be equal to 1. So let's check. So we have here 0, or cosine 0 must be equal to 1. So tama po. Now, how about cosine 30 degrees? So 30 degrees is equal to the square root of how many fingers are there above 30 degrees? So we have 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 over 2. So cosine 30 must be equal to the square root of 3 over 2. So correct po tayo ng nakuha. Now, what about cosine 45? So we have our cosine, 45 degrees must be equal to the square root of. So 45 po ito, how many fingers are there above 45? So we have 1, 2. So 2 over 2. So meaning to say cosine 45 must be equal to the square root of 2 over 2. Let's check. So cosine 45 must be equal to the square root of 2 over 2. Correct. Now, what about cosine 60? So first, let's move po muna. So cosine 60 must be equal to, how many fingers are there above 60? So there is only 1. So we have here the square root of 1 over 2. What is the value of square root of 1? That is 1 over 2. So meaning to say cosine 60 must be equal to 1 over 2. Let's check if really cosine 60 will give us 1 over 2. So that will give us 1/2. So meaning to say this is correct. Now what about our last? So cosine 90 degrees must be equal to the square root of, how many fingers are there above 90? So wala na po tayong finger. So there is 0 po over 2. The square root of 0 is 0 over 2. Now 0 divided by any number will give us 0. Now cosine 90 degrees must be equal to 0. So that is correct. So meaning to say all of this po is correct. Now, what about for sine? So for sine po, the same process lang po katulad ni cosine. However, for sine, theta, imbes na above, we need to compute for the fingers below the number. So for example, we have sine 0 degrees must be equal to, how many fingers below 0? So there is none. So the square root of 0 over 2. The square root of 0 is 0 over 2. 0 divided by any number must be equal to 0 itself. So let's check. Sine 0 must be equal to 0. So that is correct. Sine 0 is equal to 0. Now, how about if it's sine 30 degrees? So sine 30 degrees must be equal to, how many fingers are there below the number 30? So there is only 1 finger here. So 1 over 2. So the square root of 1 is 1 over 2. That is 1/2. So sine 30 must be equal to 1/2. So sine 30, check natin. is really 1/2. Now, what about if we have sine 45 degrees? Now, the square root of how many numbers below 45? So there are 1, 2. So there are 2 fingers over 2. So our answer must be sine 45 degrees must be equal to the square root of 2 over 2. So let's check. Sine 45 must be equal to the square root of 2 over 2. Now, what about sine 60? So we have here sine 60 degrees must be equal to how many fingers are there below number 60? So there are 1, 2, 3. So the square root of 3 over 2. So check po natin. Sine 60 must be the square root of 3 over 2. Sine 60 must be equal to the square root of 3 over 2. So meaning to say this is correct. Now what about sine 90 degrees? So sine 90 degrees must be equal to the square root of how many numbers are there? Below 90, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 over 2. What is the square root of 4? That is 2 over 2. 2 divided by 2, that is 1. So meaning to say sine 90 must be equal to 1. Sine 90 must be equal to 1. That is correct. So, tapos na po tayo kay sine and cosine. Paano naman po si secant and cosecant? So, my dear students, let's remember that we have the trigonometric identities such as the reciprocal identities. So, ano po tong reciprocal identities na to? Ibig sabihin po, ang secant theta is just equal to 1 over cosecant theta. And ang cosecant theta is just equal to 1 over sine theta. So, anong ibig sabihin lang po nito? Di ba po yung mga answers natin kanina, it's either whole number o kaya naman po ay fraction. Meaning to say, kung reciprocal po sila, ibig sabihin yung numerator magiging denominator at yung denominator magiging numerator. So ano pong ibig sabihin yan? So I want you to remember this opo when you are dealing with secant, cosecant, and later cotangent. So first, let's have one example. So to further illustrate, let's have one example. So for example, we have secant 45 degrees. So secant 45 degrees, sabi po sa ating reciprocal identities is equal to 1 over cosecant 45 degrees. At naalala natin, di ba, na ang cosecant theta is equal to the square root of above over 2. So, ibig sabihin, solve po muna natin si cosine 45 degrees. So, that will give us the square root of how many fingers are there above 45. So, there are 1, 2. So, we have 2 over 2. Now, sabi dito sa atin, it is, or the secant is just the reciprocal of cosine. So, ibig sabihin, ito po, the numerator will be our denominator. So, secant 45 degrees, our numerator, so this is the numerator. So this is the numerator, will be our denominator now. So yung denominator po, yun po yung number sa baba. So we have the square root of 2 and our denominator will be our numerator now. So that is the square root of or 2 over the square root of 2. However, di ba may rules po tayo sa fraction na wala daw po dapat na radical sa ating denominator. So ano pong ginagawa natin para maalis to? You are correct, that is rationalization. So paano po tayo mag-rationalize pag square root? That is multiply it or multiply both the denominator and the numerator by the number of the radical. So we have here the square root of 2 and the square root of 2. So that is 2 times the square root of 2, that is 2 the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, that is 2. So kung makikita nyo, parehas po yung numerator and denominator may 2, so that is only equal to 1. So meaning to say, secant 45 degrees must be equal to the square root of 2 only. So that is 1 over cosine 45 must be equal to the square root of 2. So kung makikita nyo dito po sa calculator, wala naman po tayong key for seconds. So ibig sabihin, kailangan gamitin pa rin po natin si reciprocal identity. So let's compute. That is really the square root of 2. So meaning to say, tama po yung ating answer. So before we proceed with cosecant, let's have another example. Let's find the value of secant 90. So we have your secant 90 degrees must be equal to 1 over cosine 90 degrees. So first, let's solve first for cosine 90. So cosine 90 degrees, that is the square root of fingers above. How many fingers are there above 90? So there is none. So we have here 0 over 2. The square root of 0 is 0 over 2. So this is our fraction now. Now, sabi daw po, yung numerator magiging denominator, ibig sabihin si 0 po gagawin natin nasa baba. At si numerator, si denominator naman po natin ngayon ang magiging numerator. So second, 90 degrees must be equal to 2 over 0. Ngayon po, di ba, in math, any number divided by 0, that is undefined. So let's check if really sa ating calculator magiging undefined yan. So we have here 1 over cosine 90. That will give us math error kasi nga po undefined siya. So now, let's proceed now to our cosecant. Sa cosecant po, katulad lang po ni secant, pagbabaliktarin po din natin yung result ni sine naman this time. So for example, we have cosecant 90 po ulit. So cosecant 90 must be equal to 1 over sine 90 degrees. So sine, imbis na above, magiging below. So sine theta must be equal to the square root of below over 2. So that will give us sine 90 degrees must be equal to how many numbers are there below 90? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have here the square root of 4 over 2. So what is the square root of 4? That is 2 over 2, or simply that is 1. So kapag cosecant na po siya, si numerator daw po magiging denominator at si denominator magiging numerator. So cosecant 90 must be equal to 2 over 2 uli, or that is still equal to 1. So let's check if really cosecant 90 is just 1. So 1 over, wala din po tayong key for cosecant. So that means kailangan po natin gamitin si sine key. So 1 over sine 90 must be equal to 1. So correct po. Really, 1 over sine 90 or cosecant 90 is equal to 1. Now what about if we choose cosecant 30? So let's have cosecant 30 degrees is equal to 1 over sine 30 degrees. So solve po muna natin si sine 30. Sine 30 must be equal to the square root of how many numbers are there below 30? So there is only 1 over 2. So what is the square root of 1? That is 1 over 2. That is 2. So, ibig sabihin po, si numerator magiging denominator at si denominator magiging numerator. So, ibig sabihin, cosecant 30 degrees must be equal to 2 over 1 or simply 2. So let's check if really cosecant 30 is equal to 2. So we have 1 over sine 30. It will give us really 2. Now, what about if our problem deals now with tangent? So sa tangent, ang gagawin lang po natin is babaliktarin lang po natin yung kamay natin. But still, yung pagkakasunod-sunod po ng mga degrees natin are just the same. Still, our little finger has 0 degrees, our ring finger has 30 degrees, our middle finger has 45 degrees, our forefinger has 60 degrees, and our thumb has 90 degrees. Now, my dear students, ito po for cotangent and tangent. But, unahin po muna natin si tangent. Ang tatandaan naman po natin kay tangent is always tangent theta is equal to the square root of the number of fingers above over the square root of number of fingers below. So ano pong ibig sabihin niya? So for example, we have tangent 0 degrees. That will give us how many fingers are there above 0? So there is none. So we have 0 here. The square root of how many fingers are there below 0? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So ibig sabihin po 4 po ito. What is the square root of 0? That is 0. What is the square root of 4? That is 2. So 0 divided by 2, that is still 0. So meaning to say, tangent 0 degrees must be equal to 0. Let's check if really tangent 0 degrees is equal to 0. So tangent 0 degrees must be equal to 0. So correct. Let's have tangent 30 degrees must be equal to how many fingers are there above 30? So there is only 1. So we have here 1 over the square root of how many numbers or how many fingers are there below 30? So we have 1, 2, 3. So we have here 3. What is the square root of 1? That is 1. What is the square root of 3? That is still square root of 3. So, di ba po, kung maalala nyo, bawal po sa mathematics ang magkaroon ng square root sa denominator. So, ibig sabihin po, katulad ng ginawa natin kanina, kailangan pa rin po natin yung i-rationalize. Pero wait lang po, suglang po natin ito. So, that will give us times the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So, kung makikita nyo po in rationalization, still wala naman pong mababago because the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 is just 1. So, a number divided by itself will give us 1 only. So, kung ito po, ang value nito, pag i-multiply natin sa 1, will just give its value, but this time in another form. So 1 times the square root of 3, that will give us the square root of 3. And the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that will give us 3. So ngayon po, my dear students, wala na tayong problema dahil wala naman pong square root sa denominator. Let's now check if really tangent 30 will give us the square root of 3 over 3. So, correct. Now let's solve for the tangent 45. So we have here tangent 45 must be equal to the square root of how many fingers are there above 45? So we have here 1, 2. So there are 2 fingers. How about below 45? So there are 1, 2. So there are still 2. So sabi ko nga po, di ba kanina, the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 is just 1 because a number divided by itself will give us 1. So let's check if really tangent 45 will give us 1. So that is correct. That is still 1. So how about tangent 60? So for tangent 60, so we have the square root of how many numbers are there above 60? So we have 3. And how many numbers are there below 60? There is only 1. So the square root of 1. So that will give us the square root of 3 over what is the square root of 1? That is 1. So simply, tangent 60 degrees will give us the square root of 3. Let's check if really the tangent 60 will give us square root of 3. So we have here tangent 60 must be equal to square root of 3. So correct po. So for tangent 90, we have here the square root of how many numbers are there above 90? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have here 4 over how many numbers are there below 90? So there is none. So we have the square root of 4 is equal to 2 and the square root of 0 is 0. So sabi po natin, 2 divided by 0 will always give us undefined. So ibig sabihin, tangent 90 must be equal to math error pag kinalculate natin. So we have tangent 90. That is math error. So now, my dear students, in order for us to calculate our cotangent, ang gagawin lang po natin, yung denominator magiging numerator at yung numerator magiging denominator. So una muna po, tanggalin na muna po natin yung mga solution pansamantala in order for us to pave way or in order for us to give space for cotangent. Pero ang gagawin lang naman po natin, since di ba po may mga fractions na po tayo dito, ang gagawin lang po natin is pagbabalik ta rin lang naman po natin sila. What will be our cotangent 0 degrees? So sabi po, di ba natin sa reciprocal identities of trigonometric function, cotangent theta is equal to 1 over tangent theta. And similarly, tangent theta is equal to 1 over cotangent theta. So yan po yung mga equivalent niya. Pero this time, ito lang po yung gagamitan muna natin. So what will be our cotangent 0 degrees if tangent 0 degrees is equal to 0 over 2? So that will give us 2 over 0 kapag binaliktad natin na si numerator magiging denominator at si denominator magiging numerator. So that will also give us undefined. So let's check if really cotangent 0 will give us undefined. So that is 1 over cotangent or 1 over tangent 0. That will give us undefined or math error. So how about ito po? See, the tangent of 30 will give us the square root of 3 over 3. But this time, si numerator po, so we have here cotangent 30 degrees must be equal to, so si denominator po magiging numerator, that will give us 3 over the square root of 3. So di ba po sabi natin dapat wala pong radical kay denominator. So kailangan po nating i-rationalize by multiplying it with the square root of 3 over 3. So 3 times the square root of 3, that will give us 3 the square root of 3. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that will give us 3. So since po parehas na may 3 and 3, kay numerator and denominator, that will only give us 1. So cotangent 30 degrees must be equal to the square root of 30. So let's check. So 1 over tangent 30 must be equal to square root of 3. So correct. So how about tangent 45? If tangent 45 is equal to the square root of 2 over 2, which is equal to 1, cotangent 45 now must be equal to the denominator must be our numerator now. So that is the square root of 2 over our numerator will be our denominator now. So itong nasa taas, gagawin natin siyang nasa baba. So that will give us still 1. So try natin if really 1 over tangent 45 will give us still 1. So that is correct. That is 1. So now how about tangent or cotangent 60? So we have here cotangent 60 degrees is equal to 1 over the square root of 3. So si dating denominator, gagawin numerator, at si dating numerator, magiging denominator. Pero di ba po may rule tayo na no radical in our denominator. So that will give us the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So 1 times the square root of 3, that is square root of 3 over square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that is 3. So this will be our answer now. So calculate po natin. So cotangent 60, so that is 1 over tangent 60 must be equal to the square root of 3 over 3. So tama naman po. Now finally, tangent 90. So if tangent 90 is equal to 2 over 0 or that is undefined, let's now find what is the value of cotangent 90 degrees. So cotangent 90 degrees, si dating denominator na nasa baba, gagawin natin ngayong nasa taas. So that is 0. And si dating numerator na nasa taas, gagawin natin denominator sa baba. So that will give us 0 over 2. 0 divided by any number will give us 0. So check natin kung si cotangent 90 will really be equal to 0. So dito po siya. Tangent 90 is equal to 0. So meaning to say, tama po yung answer natin. That's it for today, my dear students. If you still have questions, please don't hesitate to comment down below. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. So I'll see you next time. Goodbye!